What's up everyone, Tom from the Airsoft headquarters here, and welcome back to 5-Minute Fixes, where I try to explain some common issues that Airsoft players might be having in under 5 minutes, or nothing happens. I still get paid and I still do stuff, so I don't know why that was relevant. Anyway, we're gonna be talking about magazines, mid caps versus high caps, and we're just gonna roll a 5-minute clock right now. So, magazines. Typically, there are two different types of magazines that are available on the Airsoft market, high caps and mid caps. We're gonna talk about high caps first. So high caps refer to high capacity. That's why there's the term high caps, because it stands for high capacity. And these are not called high kappas. High kappas are a pistol. These are called high caps. So generally, high caps are going to hold 300 to 900 total rounds in total capacity, dependent on the model size and system. What they generally do is, if we look at an M4 diagram specifically, what they do is they take BBs into a very large reservoir, and by turning a wheel on the very inside of the mechanism, it takes the BBs from a large reservoir and feeds them into a single file line that load up and into the Airsoft hop-up unit or Airsoft rifle system. So, example is this right here. So this is very similar to that of this. So as the BBs get poured into the high caps, which there's a trap door, you literally just take your total number of BBs, pour them into the follower, making some amount of mess all over, closing the trap door. There's a wheel on the bottom that you need to make sure are gravity assisted. So you have to make sure that the magazine is vertically upwards. Otherwise, if the BBs or the magazine is like this entire internal system is up here. The BBs are at the top of the magazine and the wheel cannot grab on into anything, so you have to make sure that this is like this. I know there are some people that like to hold their rifle like this and try to use the wheel. The wheel's not grabbing onto anything, and thus, that's why BBs aren't loading into the magazine there. Also, you do have to sit there and wind and wind and wind. This one's broken, so that's why it doesn't sound totally correct, but you get the total idea. So, BBs turn into the follower. You load them up into the load the magazine up into the rifle, and then you need to continually wind BBs to continually apply pressure from the BBs in the reservoir into the BBs in the single file line. And that's pretty much how a high capacity magazine works. Large reservoir BBs that you need to manually turn a wheel to take from the large reservoir into a single file line. There are different types of high capacity style of magazines, such as flash magazines. Flash magazines still utilize that same internal system, but instead of using your finger in order to turn that entire system over, it takes a wheel or a string, and by pulling that string, it is going to turn that internal mechanism over significantly faster. So in the amount of time that it takes you to turn a wheel over 5-6 times in order to get the same amount of BBs, you pull the string once. So you can just zip and be good for a little bit longer compared to that of a standard high cap. So flash mags are going to be more advantageous and are going to look more similar to that of a standard style of magazine. Now the step up from a flash magazine is going to be a drum magazine. A drum magazine is going to be this type of style where it looks like a drum. The styles of drum magazines are going to hold significantly more as far as capacity, generally 1,200 to, in some cases, 5,000 rounds, but the same internal system is applied, where it comes from a large reservoir, as far as the BBs need to go into a large reservoir, and then either by manually turning a wheel, using a flash magazine wire wheel, or via an internal mechanical system that is activated by a button press or by activation of sound, is going to take the BBs from a large reservoir and up into the single file line. So this is a system that will give you the most capacity and generally comes with with brand new rifles directly out of the box. There are some very rare cases where Airsoft rifles are going to come with mid-capacity style of magazines or mid-caps. So obviously, mid-capacity, mid-caps, not mid-kappa, mid-caps. And those generally are going to hold 30 to 250 rounds, again, depending on the overall style platform and the design of the magazine inherently. So The internals of a magazine for a mid cap are going to look something like this, which is going to be all The BBs are held under one solid spring tension. So due to the constraints of not having a larger reservoir, that is going to be what dictates the overall magazine capacity. So if we look at a generic mid-cap like one of the original PTS EPMs, these originally held 150 total rounds. Since then, they have upgraded to their EPM1s, which now hold 250 rounds. So more advantageous. You hold more rounds per magazine compared to that of traditional magazines. So now the argument becomes, do you just run mid-caps because you can generally get as many rounds as one of the lower capacities of high caps? When it comes to mid-cap magazines, you do need a special tool in order to load these since there is no large reservoir. For that, you need a special loader, such as this, one of the smaller pistol magazine profile of speed loaders, that you're going to pour the BBs into the larger reservoir. Try to do this as fast as possible. So you take BBs from a bottle, load them into the speed loader. The speed loader then has to be injected like so. In some cases, if you're in a hurry, you can do something like that. Still, I wouldn't suggest that because you can break the speed loader mechanism. And since all the BBs are held under one solid spring tension, if you pull the follower back, it's going to release all of the BBs in a very fast rate. One of the other types, one of the more popular style of speed loaders for mid-caps are going to be Odin or Odin clones from Valken. I personally utilize the Valken clones because I'm a cheap loader. So again, they hold a bunch of BBs. The Valken ones hold 1,000 rounds, and there is a manual crank on the side here to take the BBs from the large reservoir and load them as quickly as possible into the mid-cap magazine, which makes loading these EPM magazines or EPM1 magazines super, super fast. And I'll show you what that looks like. Super duper fast, and they all come out like that. So you can get super fast, super speedy BBs going up into the rifle using some of the PTS mid-caps, which I personally use. Some of the things to consider when it comes to mid-caps is you have real caps or real capacity magazines which hold as many rounds in similarity to that of the real firearm. So for an M4, a real cap magazine would hold 30 rounds. For an AK, it would hold 30 or 20 rounds or something like that. You know, just whatever. Again, for mid-caps, you need a special speed loader in order to get those BBs in. Otherwise, you don't want to look super, super dumb by trying to hand load every single BB for 250 rounds. That's going to get very time consuming and your thumb is going to get sore. So the follower system, like I was talking about on the mid-cap magazines, that is still something that is used in design with the high caps as well. That is the system that retains the BBs inside of the magazines so they don't spill everywhere while they're sitting in your gear. And that follower system will get pushed out of the way as you load the magazine up into the hop-up unit. I actually have this backwards, I realize, but I think you guys can get the idea, where the reason that the BBs load into the rifle is due to meeting the face of the hop-up unit, which pushes that follower out of the way. So just like I did, as soon as I pulled that follower back with my finger, all of the BBs shot out of the magazine. But if the follower stays where it's supposed to be, none of the BBs are going to fall out after you load them. So explain that. It is also completely normal for BBs to fall out of your hop-up unit once you remove the magazine. So we'll say with this MP5 high cap magazine specifically, since it is partially loaded and I load it into the rifle, wind a couple of BBs up into that follower system, shoot a couple times, and now I want to go off the field for some reason. If I do remove that magazine, there are a couple BBs that fell out of that hop-up unit. That is completely normal because there are some BBs that need to fit inside of that hop-up unit in order to push the BBs up into the nozzle. So there's a couple of BBs that sit, there's the one that sits here, and there's another, generally 3 or 4 that sit inside of that extension of the hop-up unit. Before the follower, when you remove the magazine, the follower comes out and it will catch this BB, but it can't catch these other 4 or these other 3. So these 3 will fall out. This stays inside of the hop-up unit. this stays in the magazine. So that's why it is completely normal for BBs to fall out of the hop-up unit or out of the rifle when you remove the magazine, like so. 100% normal, not an issue with the rifle or the magazine. Pros and cons. So the advantage of having a high capacity magazine or a high cap is that you physically hold more rounds. Like I said, generally the lowest capacity of high cap magazines is 300 total rounds, and you have the option to go up to 900, or in some very rare cases, even more than 900. Mid caps, because they hold less, can be a disadvantage. However, you can remedy that by holding more magazines. However, in the total capacity of holding the same number of magazines, such as if I were to retain, or if I hold 4 EPM1s, that would be a total of about 1,000 rounds. Versus if I held 4 high caps, then that becomes 1,500 total rounds. So you physically hold more rounds for a high cap than you do a mid cap. However, when we want to talk about some of the stealthy natures of airsoft gameplay, when you have a magazine that is fully or even partially loaded for a mid cap magazine, if you shake it around, it doesn't make any sound, none at all. Versus a high cap magazine makes a lot of noise. Now this one doesn't have any in the large reservoir, but then they're retained all in the follower system. So if I grab this one, makes a lot of noise. Not super stealthy and not super tactical. So when it comes to some of the more advanced players or some of the more tactical players, they're gonna generally prefer mid-cap style of magazines. One of the other advantages is the quality of magazine. So when it comes to high caps, these are the least expensive and the easiest for airsoft companies to produce in some cases. There are some cases where there are very inexpensive magazines for mid caps, and there are some cases where high caps are significantly more expensive. It just depends on branding and manufacturing. So what that means is, for a average priced high capacity magazine, I still would be a little leery as far as tossing this around, because generally they are going to be a metal exterior with some polymer end caps. Which is not super great because these can retain a lot of weight and will carry momentum when you want to either drop them to the ground or possibly throw them into your gear or anything like that. So I personally would be more concerned when throwing these around like that. Not super awesome, and I would have concerns with a high cap magazine. Versus the PTS magazines, they are made specifically to handle more pressure and more stress. They're going to be a lighter weight. They are going to be a polymer construction, which means they're lightweight, but they can physically take more damage. And in some cases, I have overhand whipped these at doorways in order to make it sound like a grenade go off or make it a distraction inside of rooms. So doing this as an overhand toss, I usually throw it way faster, but I don't want to break my wall behind the camera. I'm not nearly concerned with the EPM mid-cap magazine since they're designed to impact at high velocities, not the high caps. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. And that's currently it as far as airsoft magazines. I definitely went over the 5-minute limit, so please forgive me. But anyway, I hope that I answered all the possible questions that you guys might have about magazines within airsoft. If you do have any further questions, put them down in the comments section below. I'll do my best to answer them. If there's anything else you guys would like to see as far as airsoft guns and gear and stuff like that, put them down in the comments section below. I'll do my best as far as creating content about that. But that's currently it as far as magazines. So you guys take care, stay safe, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.